you see the LBMA saying, the Bank of England, yeah, we got to go to 8 weeks instead of 1 day. Sorry, we don't have enough trucks or manpower. Something is going on with gold and silver. Again, the price is the greatest tool of misdirection. And it's a high stakes game. You have the biggest banks in the world. It's an existential threat to their survival. To me, the term asymmetrical comes to mind when I think of silver, the lowest downside with the best upside. But you better have strong fingertips and better be able to tune out the noise, because the noise will drive you insane. And the long-term technical fundamentals look extraordinary. This huge cup and handle, and it's just about to break through a declining wedge, a very bullish technical factor. Certainly India is continuing to accumulate gold, and maybe it's just too new and hasn't really broken out into something more than some skirmishes. Maybe if it were to become evident that this is getting very scary, it would, and it should. I mean, look, in the West, the market is too reactionary. You could argue that the folks in India and in China and that part of the world have been accumulating so much gold and silver for so long that it has less of an effect over there than it normally would. It should manifest itself here. And what do we see instead? We see people moving away from the risk off trade into the risk on trade. And it just goes to show that the masses are typically always in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's why guys like Rick Rule, who have made a fortune, have done so as being a contrarian. And he's famous for saying, if you're not a contrarian, you'll be a victim. Well, right now, that is kind of what the world is saying. And I wouldn't look to the gold price, which has been for a very long time managed for several reasons, although I would argue that they've lost the ability to manage gold. Not yet silver. I would argue that China is controlling gold more than the West is ultimately. And so, rising gold is something that doesn't benefit any of these players really rising gold yet until the final resolution or the final understanding that if you don't get whatever isn't nailed down, it's too late. Well, we're not there yet, but I wouldn't look to that. I think that's maybe slightly misleading, and maybe it's not as severe as we are being led to believe, since there is a pause. Cooler heads are prevailing. Let's hope. But everything that I've ever noticed about war, Kai, is that we would think the price should be going higher, and the players that like to manage its price, well, they will delink that rationale. They will delink the people's belief that when things get scary, you should run to gold, and they do it by shorting the paper price. And it kind of, don't look here, just keep on walking. And I would argue China's involved in that too. They want to continue to accumulate as much gold as possible. So by shorting the price during these conflicts, or not allowing it to run quite the way that it should as a result of it, makes people think, maybe I should buy Bitcoin instead, or buy something else. At the same time, they're doubling down their own accumulation efforts off of a lower price. So that's been kind of part of the playbook for a very long time, and ultimately will accentuate itself. But the immediacy, and that's just it. People in this country are always looking for a reason. Well, that, the market went down because, for this reason. Oh, well, that's great. Now I feel better. There's a lot more to all of this than just something like a skirmish between two angry nuclear powers. That's bad enough as it is. But maybe if it broke into something far more frightening, we would see gold finally start to move as a result of that. Is still controlled, no question about it. But when you talk about, in terms of the amount of silver that's being accumulated here in the United States, since Easter, at least almost, and I haven't updated it since last week, but since Easter, about 12,000 silver contracts have been delivered. That's almost 2,000 tons of silver. That's not a small amount, and it's not, that's something that should be understood and not glossed over, because the price has not done what it's supposed to do. And I think, people get so tired of hearing that, because it's been that way for quite some time. They perhaps are becoming disenchanted, but yet there's money here in the United States at a higher level that understands what's happening, that is standing for delivery in quantities that we've never ever seen before. I think that to me is one of the biggest things that I would focus on. And in so far on the May contract in silver, which is an active delivery month, there has been, let's see here, it's record pace. So far, as of Friday of last week, 13,581 contracts have been delivered. That's an all-time high. And one of the things that is unusual about it is that almost 3,200 contracts, about 16 million ounces, were delivered from the banks to non-banks. Now, we're not seeing the same thing with gold, where banks are delivering as much to non-banks. Since, I don't know, when QE doing, I don't know how far back we go on this, but over the last year or two, the banks have quietly offloaded over 110 million ounces of silver to non-bank entities. Who are these non-bank entities? I'm not quite sure. To me, this screams that institutions like the banks are frightened of silver and maybe are getting out, while others, the industrials or military industrial complexes, standing for delivery on all of this stuff. You can only hold down the price of any commodity or manipulate it over an extended period of time by pushing it in the direction that it is going. You have China doing interviews with Sean Kunkun and others in the resource space have said to me, Andy, China is flying all throughout South America, in particular Peru, and they're buying up all the doré and the concentrate. The doré are crudely refined bars, and the concentrate is a byproduct sludge, paying double what the West will and sending it back to China for refining. Well, why would the second largest producer of silver in the world need to do that? Buying this stuff and then sending it back, paying over market price and sending it back for refining. Well, it disintermediates the market, disintermediates the price. No one knows how much they're buying, and they go right to the source. Russia says, well, we're going to add it to our strategic stockpile. India has bought over 900 million ounces in the last 5 years, probably more than that. That's just what we can calculate.